Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Zoom meeting around the second call of the UK Future Treescapes programme. I'm joined by my colleagues Alice Goodenough and Abigail Stone from the Ambassador team, and also by Weiho Zong, who's a Senior Programme Manager at NERC, and Lucy Hopewell, who's a Senior Science Officer at NERC, and other ESRC and AHRC colleagues. And they'll be helping answer some of the questions after I've given my presentation. Can I ask everyone to turn their mics off, please? Someone has their mic on. Great. All right. So I'm going to start by giving just a brief overview of the call. We'll then have a bit of a question and answer session to me and to my UKRI colleagues for any issues or matters of clarification. And then we're going to go into a networking session. You can be allocated to different breakout rooms, and there'll be a chance to rotate twice through these rooms and hopefully make some connections, compare notes, have a discussion about the call. And then we'll finish up with a few kind of things just to refer you to, information sources, upcoming events, etc. All right, I should say, okay, let me share my screen. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. So this is the second call. I'm going to talk to you about the second call of the UK Future Treescapes programme. As most of you probably know, this is a significant investment of money in advancing, improving our understanding of the environmental, socioeconomic and cultural functions and roles of treescapes. It has three main themes, actually, the programme overall, looking at the form and function of treescapes, investigating pathways to expansion of woodland and forests, and also exploring pathways to resilience, building resilience of our future treescapes. The programme is funded by UKRI, and the first call also had additional funding from DEFRA, from the Scottish and Welsh governments. First call was for 6 large interdisciplinary research projects. I will talk about those briefly in a minute. So those are already begun. The research is already underway. Call 2, which we're talking about today, will fund up to 5 smaller projects with a budget ceiling of £620,000 FEC. So this call is for smaller projects, but hopefully equally exciting and diverse as a range of projects. We suggest that in terms of future calls or future opportunities, you check regularly UKRI funding websites or indeed our own Treescapes programme website, as I'll talk about at the very end of the presentation. So that's the overview of the whole programme. We already have 6 projects up and running or beginning. Very wide portfolio of projects addressing all aspects of future treescapes. Just to quickly take you through these summaries. So New Leaf is a project which is really combining historical analysis and computer modelling to better understand the adaptability of trees to particularly pest and disease outbreaks, and really to consider strategies to improve that adaptability over time. Membra is investigating both epigenetic stress memory and human memory to establish new ways of talking, thinking, and valuing our treescapes and forests. Branching Out is probably the most urban-focused of the 6 projects, and that's really assessing how improved ways of measuring and valuing trees in urban settings can help promote a more kind of coordinated and consistent approach to tree planting, tree management, treescape establishment as it is. Voices of the Future, that argues that really the perceptions and imaginings of children and young people need to be much more emphasised in debates about future treescapes. And they're working with young people to reimagine treescapes of the future. Connected Treescapes is a project that's exploring the connections between people and communities and their treescapes. They're doing this at a variety of scales across urban and rural settings, and they're particularly investigating the role of partnership working in enhancing those connections in order to improve human well-being. And then finally, Castor. Castor is a project focused on riparian woodland, and it's mapping out the current resource and also using arts-based methods and other methods to really explore how best to engage communities in restoring the long-term restoration of these types of woodland. So a very exciting portfolio of projects to which we're now looking to add a further set of projects.
Black one.
Two. Someone has the mic on. So call 2, the rationale for call 2 is in the first instance to address gaps that we've identified from call 1. We undertook quite an extensive consultation exercise. We talked to stakeholders and policymakers, consulted them and reflected on their feedback and designed this call around that. And if the call has a kind of as a motif, then it's very much focused around solutions, as a solutions-focused approach. And we're looking for projects that will very strongly involve stakeholders in both the building of the projects and their execution. If I can take you through the 3 funding priorities. So I should say at the beginning that all applications are expected to nest within those 3 overarching themes of the programme that I've already identified. But then in addition to address one or more of these funding priorities. And the first priority is looking at or inviting projects which are exploring how we can deliver woodland expansion to landscape scale. I think it goes without saying that if we're to meet current planting targets, then we're going to see landscape scale change, very large scale change. Some of those changes may be controversial and they could be contested. And we'd like to see project proposals that propose to investigate some of those landscape scale effects and really the extent to which positive and negative impacts can be managed for and also resolved through different processes. We're also interested under this priority in projects that specifically address tree planting, how tree planting on farmland can be better incentivized by combining grant aid and market-based incentives, and what the best way to achieve this integrated approach might be. So that's the first priority, really looking at delivery at a landscape scale, the impacts of woodland expansion at a landscape scale. Priority 2, we're inviting under this priority or encouraging proposals under this priority, which really explore further the risks to our future treescapes from various sources, including, of course, climate risk, and how we can address these through better planting combinations, natural regeneration, of course, better forest design, new technologies and management. And also, we're interested in work which might investigate how risks are currently perceived and managed by forest managers and others, and what can be done to raise awareness and improve risk communication throughout the stakeholder community. Also under this priority, we'd be interested in proposals which look at some of the economic and financial and supply chain constraints on woodland expansion in the UK. Priority 3 is focused around tools and frameworks. So under this priority, we'd be looking for applications which aim to develop and test different frameworks, different methodologies and tools that can be used by managers of various sorts. And we might include under that heading policymakers, planners, landowners, of course, professional foresters and different community groups. Examples of tools, there are many, of course, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but we could be thinking here about decision aids and toolkits that bring together and integrate the needs, held values, preferences of different stakeholders. And we're also inviting proposals to develop evaluation frameworks. And for instance, looking at the contribution of treescape expansion in meeting net zero and biodiversity recovery targets. So those are the three priorities. In terms of funding requirements, as before and as under the second call, it's a requirement that all proposals will need to be interdisciplinary, need to demonstrate interdisciplinarity, and also to fit the remit of more than one research council. So that really means that proposals need to cover the remit of, for instance, NERC and ESRC, or AHRC and ESRC.
You're muted.
Can you all hear me still? So we're looking particularly for early engagement with stakeholders in developing proposals. In the proposal itself, we will be looking for a demonstration of that involvement, and also descriptions of routes to impact through that engagement. So that's definitely a requirement of proposals. The timeline, so the call is already open. Interested parties are required to submit a notification of intent by the 14th of January, and the closing date is the 22nd of March. And you'll see there that the panel will meet in late May, and successful awards should be announced in June, with a starting date of the 1st of August, a later starting date of the 1st of August next year. Okay. Any further information can be found from a variety of sources. We've put some frequently asked questions on the Treescapes website, and you can see the call text via the UKR website. We also have a Collaborator finder, which we'll talk a bit more about in a moment. I think this might be a good moment to stop and invite questions, if that's all right. So anyone is welcome to ask questions of clarification, either about the procedure or about the priorities and the scope of the call. So please fire away.
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Is the funding open to all, or is it restricted to early career academics?
So it's open to all applicants as usual. Yeah.
Could you speak a bit more about the process of working with non-academic partners, limitations of type of partner and amounts, and types of payment that could be given to them? Are there any restrictions to whom we can work with?
There are no restrictions on the types of organisations or individuals. Obviously, you have to justify their involvement in the proposal. Weihao, would you like to say something about the more technical side of that, the issue of payments, etc.?
Sure, Clive. Yes, I think in the first instance I will direct everybody to the main text, which I have put in a link into the chat. So, with regard to involvement of the stakeholder or non-academic partners, so we did include specific sections around it. I think going into far more details about how these different types of organisations could get involved. So I think rather than me going to the repeating sort of all the bullet points from there, I think maybe it's best if if you have any specific questions about the type of partners, then feel free to get in touch with the program team and NERC using the program email. Or using the chat within this call.
Great. There's a question about how this differs from call one. I think it's best to say it's a slightly more focused call, and it's definitely giving more emphasis to research which shows clear routes to impact and is designed around finding solutions to all the issues to do with woodland expansion. So it's a much more solutions-focused call. Projects are probably going to be quite applied. They would still be as interdisciplinary, hopefully, but they would have a focus around one or more of those priorities that I've described. There's another question about supply chain issues. That has been kind of flagged. These are indicative, by the way. I mean, within the broad priority, there's lots of scope for identifying other areas which are relevant to each of those priorities. But yes, supply chain constraints under priority 2 would be of interest to us. Projects that are investigating those constraints would be of interest to us. There's a question about funding is only for 24 months to scope for actual practical planting or demonstration. Well, that's a bit difficult to answer. Perhaps there might be potential for demonstration plots, but obviously this money is not going to fund long-term experiments in that sense.
There are a couple of people with their hands up. Charles Watkins, do you want to ask your question?
Charles, yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering, Clive, how the projects can relate to the existing projects. Should people who are thinking of putting in a project be sort of finding out about how the existing projects are going and how they might interrelate, or should we just go it alone?
I think it would be very sensible to brief yourself about the individual projects, of course, because this is building on Call 1.
Yeah.
And hopefully the projects that we fund will be complementary to work that's been done under Call 1. But we're certainly not suggesting necessarily that they have to come out of Call 1 projects. These you can completely invent new projects that are completely separate. Yeah.
Thanks.
Do we have another hand up?
We did, Charles.
Tilly. Hello, Tilly. Yeah.
No, I was going to ask the same question that Charles asked, so my hand went down.
All right.
Over to you, Tilly.
Okay.
I was just thinking about the supply chain issues and whether you were thinking about bottom-up supply chain issues, as in can we plant them, where are we going to get the stock, that kind of supply chain issue, or whether you're thinking more about the longer term onward, where is this timber going in the croplands?
Well, probably inevitably we're thinking of both, actually. So as you would expect, I think those immediate supply chain constraints, and they're interesting and they're worthy of investigation. But it would be nice to have projects which take a long view.
Thank you.
We've got a question in the chat. What time horizon should we demonstrate impact at?
Wayham.
Sure. Yes. So with regard to impact points, I think clearly we understand that when we talk about impact, these things are going to have to emerge over a much longer time period than certainly the duration of the projects. Obviously, we would want so obviously as with all research council grants, you have to obviously record the research outcomes and the impact through the system issuing research fish, for example. There might also be additional reporting requirements through the ambassadors, like including Clive and Julie. So I guess the focus is around the outputs and then eventually into outcomes that can result in impacts being in the next probably 10, 15, 20 years plus. I think that's particularly given the focus of these treescapes, I think we really think about impact in the longer term in sort of decadal sort of time span. Clive, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, that's good. Yes, I think it's important that projects are able to demonstrate how their engagement with stakeholders will lead to impact, will have impact implications. That needs to be rehearsed and set out in proposals. So we are definitely looking for that. But the time horizon, yes, I'd concur, I think.
Another question.
Lots of questions.
As the funding is for 24 months, is there any scope for actual practical planting or establishment of demonstration plots?
I think I've dealt with that, Abby. We've mentioned that. Good. There's a question about co-funding with the AHRC. So someone's asking, are you envisaging collaboration with arts and humanities? Yes, definitely, as with Call One. And it's a feature of Call One projects that arts and humanities researchers, arts-based researchers, are very very much involved. So that was a nice feature of Call One, and we would hope to see a similar pattern emerging in Call Two projects. It's very much part of the philosophy of the program that we're bringing together natural scientists with social scientists and with arts-based researchers and artists. We want the full gamut if possible.
So, Clive, there's a question here from Rick Lewis from the RSPB saying priority 1 seems to ignore the potential role of natural regeneration in woodland expansion. Is that right?
No, it's not. Rick, I think we've had an email exchange, but natural regeneration is definitely within scope, and it is mentioned in the other 2 priorities, I think. But yes, looking at tree planting, woodland expansion, and natural regeneration as processes.
Okay, yeah, it is mentioned in priority 2, but not in priority 1. So, thanks, Clive.
Okay, so then there's another question from Adrian Newton asking, can I ask about private sector involvement specifically? Are there any limits in the kind of activity that can be supported among private sector partners?
It's another very nice question for Wei Hao.
Thanks. Yes, so I think this is stated in the core, in the funding opportunity document itself. So businesses can participate and engage with the projects, and they can engage as project partners, which means that they will be expected to provide essentially in-kind or in-cash support to help with the research activities. Or indeed, businesses can participate as subcontractors, so they can be given a subcontract within the application. But in that case, the relationship will be deemed to be one of that the businesses will be providing a service, perhaps because the research team doesn't have necessarily the right expertise or the capability, so they will be delivering something specific as a part of the overall package of research activities.
Thanks, Wei Hao. There's another question here that might be relevant to you as well. Someone's asking, what needs to be included in the expression of interest?
Lucy, do you want to take that one? Are you on the call?
Yeah, so this is there's a web form, obviously. It's very brief form, so all you'll need to provide is sort of a title, a very brief summary of what you're proposing to do, and a list of the main investigators and potential project partners. Just to be clear, that the expression of interest, notification of intent is not going to be assessed. It's just really to help us in the office plan the assessment process. So there is scope between the notification of intent stage and the full bid. You can sort of add extra partners or change investigators and so on. We'd expect the broad scope of your project to remain the same, but you're not sort of being pinned down to anything at that stage, really. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Lucy. There's another question here from Rebecca Cassidy, who wants to know whether orchards fit into this call.
So yes, most definitely.
And Sarah Hetlinger is asking, can we include people from projects in Call One? So can people who are already working on Call One be included in projects applying to Call Two?
That's an eligibility question, which I'm afraid, Wei Hao, you will have to direct to you again.
Yes, so I don't think that there's a problem with people already involved in Core One to submit proposals or be involved in sort of other bids coming to Core Two. But obviously, like Clive mentioned earlier, there's no expectation that the bids that we receive for this call have to be directly linked to the call one. So the point I want to get across is that so that if you are not one of the projects, you're not working with one of the projects already funded from call one, you are not at a disadvantage for call two, because they'll be treating you exactly the same way.
Thanks, Wei-Hao. Carol Collett, I don't know if you want to ask your question. It's about the AHRC funding the project and how collaboration with the arts and humanities in this call is envisaged. Carol, have you got anything else that you wanted to say about that? We can find you. No, I'll read the question. So it just says, as this is co-funded with the AHRC, how are you envisaging collaboration with arts and humanities, specifically in relation to this call?
I think we would, this is a good example where it would be very valuable to go and look at the Call One projects and to see very good examples of that kind of the sort of collaborations that seem to work and do well in terms of how they're assessed. But I don't think we can be prescriptive about exactly how arts-based or arts and humanities researchers engage with projects. There are many different avenues for engagement. But look at the Call One projects, which give some examples.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just mindful. I think Maria from HRC is on the call.
Maria, please.
Would you like to add to that, Maria?
Hi, yeah, just to say absolutely what Clive said. Don't be too prescriptive. Absolutely, everyone can get engaged. And just a reminder of the remit in terms of making sure that you are collaborating across the Research Council, not specifically sticking to one. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a question related to that really, which is from John Redhead, which is saying, how is the requirement for interdisciplinary work and covering the remits of at least 2 councils assessed? On the basis of the organisations involved, people involved, work proposed, or all 3?
Well, I think it has to be, the assessment is of the quality of the application proposals. So that's a combination of all those things. It's both the personnel and the team that's been convened, but also, of course, the work programme and how well that demonstrates interdisciplinarity and how that will be developed and promoted through the life of a project.
Can I just quickly add to that? I just want to emphasise that what we're looking for are genuine interdisciplinary proposals. We're not looking for, I guess you could call it sort of tokenism, whereby researchers from different disciplines are included, but clearly they haven't been fully brought in and integrated within that into that proposal. So we definitely encourage people to think in the genuinely interdisciplinary.
Okay, great. Thanks, Wei-Hao. I feel like we might have covered this, but I'm going to say it.
We're looking for more hands up, but there don't seem to be any at the moment.
Well, so. there's a question here about what if project partners are artist businesses that need paying, i.e. artists, researchers, idea generators and subcontractors. And we spoke about that, but perhaps you want to just reiterate, Wei-Hao, how kind of community-based organisations can be involved in an application.
Okay, I think there are 2 slightly sort of separate questions here. One is about I'm reading the question there. It says artist businesses. So I guess if they're businesses, then I would expect them to participate as subcontractor if they want to be paid directly through the project. So they'll have the costs included within the project. If they are community-based organizations, so again, I think in the core text, we give some examples of these, include community sort of grassroots groups or charities and non-for-profit groups. For those type of organization, the researchers can request their costs to be covered within the core within their budget. And there are some details around how much they could claim. For example, that the total amount claimed for those type of organisations cannot exceed 10% of the total budget of the proposal. So there's some differences in terms of how that's being sort of dealt with. So I suggest having a look at the text, and if you have specific questions about that, feel free to get in touch with the program inbox. We can deal with any specific queries.
Someone has a question, Kate Gann has a question about, would applications that focus on specific regions be of interest? Is that too narrow a focus? Well, of course, I mean, there's lots, these are smaller projects, so one would expect that they might have a case study focus, but as always, it would be also, we would also be looking for the potential for to extend beyond that case study to look to extract or infer some more general implications. But case study work, of course, that's absolutely within scope.
Yeah, Clive, can you see a question from Edward Wilson asking, can some of the partners be from outside the UK, e.g. Ireland, Germany, Canada?
Yeah, that's again an eligibility question, which I think it's better that Wayhab answers this rather than me. Wayhab.
I think, yes, I think if they're outside the UK as project partners, I think they can be engaged with it. But obviously bear in mind the focus of the core is on the future of UK treescapes. So I think you have to be mindful that how that collaboration partnership might translate to the UK context. But certainly I think we're not against projects in developing partnerships with academic or other partners outside the UK. But yeah, just need to keep in mind of how that will be relevant to the UK context.
Great, thanks, Wayhao. There's a couple of people asking about urban treescapes. How do urban treescapes fit into this call?
Again, that's urban treescapes are within scope. Of course, they are. So, provided that you're addressing one or more of the priorities, that will be fine. It's worth perhaps looking at the branching out Call 1 project, because that is the most urban focused of the currently funded projects. But of course, I mean, there's enormous scope to look at other aspects of the question.
And I can see Gabriel Henry's got his hand up.
Hello, yeah, thank you. Very informative so far. Thank you very much, Clive. I'm representing a stakeholder group, so a small charity. We've got a state-of-art woodland creation platform we've just been building with DEFRA as a tested trial, with 9,000 stakeholders engaged with us. I was quite excited by this opportunity of working with academics to continue and test that. But are you saying, Wayho, that we only are eligible for 10% of the total budget, so maximum 60-odd thousand? Is that correct?
That would be the case within a single project. But of course, you could potentially be involved in multiple projects.
So it's quite limiting then in one sense. If you want to really build on existing platforms, it's quite a big ask to, with that sort of budget in mind, to build something that comprehensive and test it in 24 months with that limiting budget.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have limited budget for this call, and appreciating that this is, in terms of the investment, is much smaller than the first call. But so I think what I would say, obviously this is advice for all the project is considering what would be feasible within the scope of the budget available. But I do appreciate that it was always be better to have more funds.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I'm still keen. So yeah, please get in touch.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, Dave Prescott is asking, is there scope for involvement from private sector forestry expertise?
In principle, yes. UK, all right. I think again might have a view on that. I don't want to say the wrong thing about that. I would think that if it can be categorized as a stakeholder, then of course, I mean, the scope for that involvement. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Again, I think there's some details around, specific expectations of being, project partners or subcontractors. So, I suggest you have a look at the core text for the details. But absolutely, yeah, I think expertise in those other sectors are welcome too.
Great, thanks, Wei Hao. And I'm not sure if we've covered this. Jill Thompson is asking, can outside UK partners be funded? I think we talked about it depends on how they might contribute to the perspective, you know, solutions towards UK treescapes resilience and expansion.
I guess I can add quickly to that question. So if they are project partners, again, like I mentioned earlier, there's expectation that they'll be providing either in cash or in kind or both support to the projects. But the applicants can request minor sort of essentially TNS support for those sort of collaborations, but obviously those would be kind of quite minor costs.
Colin McKechnie is asking about the assessment process. So yes, the fit to scheme will look at the extent to which the proposal aligns to, as I've said, the overarching 3 themes, but then addresses one or more of those priorities that I've talked about in my presentation. If you think about it, it's quite easy actually to nest a project which addresses one of the priorities within those broad, they're quite broad, those broad themes. But think about those funding priorities because that is the focus of the call.
Okay, and Mandy Dillon is asking, are you looking to fund projects from each of the priorities, or will it depend on one? How I can't quite get that second part of the question.
I think she's asking, does the project have to address all 3 priorities? No. So it can address just one of the priorities, and that's fine. Or more than one, but it's not a necessary requirement to address all 3 priorities. There is overlap again between the priorities. I think, you know, this is set out in the call text, really.
Just to add to that, as the funders, we'll be looking to fund a balanced portfolio project that covers all 3 priorities, basically.
Yeah.
But there's no expectation any one project will address all 3.
Great, and Edward Wilson is asking, can you clarify the concept of impact and how this is assessed, please? Is it mostly about research papers? What about outreach, knowledge transfer, technical tools, new methods, etc.?
It is the call is for projects that involve quite applied research. So we're thinking about impacts across the whole range of actors. So thinking about the stakeholder community, stakeholder landscape, projects may be able to demonstrate impact in terms of offering technical tools. I talked about new toolkits that could be used in the field. They might generate new understandings that can inform how we rebalance and redesign our grant aid schemes and how we bring grant aid into a better integrated relationship with market-based incentives. You know, we're thinking about impacts a longer route, so probably medium long term, and being felt in many different kind of aspects throughout the stakeholder landscape. It's quite difficult in a short conversation to describe what impact is, but you know, there is much scope within a proposal to talk through and explain one's own understanding of impact and how that justifies the approach of the research.
Sorry if this is a repeat, Clive, but did we answer the question around would applications with a focus on a specific region or regions be of interest, or is that too narrow in focus?
Yeah, I think we've addressed that one.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I think we can now go to the networking sessions, actually, if no one else has any other questions. Good.